Welcome to climate.edu. Climate change is a systemic problem, possibly the mother of all systemic problems, and requires an unprecedented level of global coordination, cooperation, and partnership between different sectors, within sectors, and in some ways, some specific ways, higher education, at least in the US, which I know the most about, does this really well. Think about the dissemination of research or coordinating workforce needs with state and local governments. But outside of a few examples, higher education really isn't adept at this at all. Maybe that's because it's not one thing. There are different types of institutions, community colleges, 4 years, research ones, public, private. They all have varying missions, funding streams, student populations, accreditation bodies. Even publicly funded institutions within a state compete for a dwindling supply of students. This can often disincentivize meaningful collaboration. Since the early aughts, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, or AASHE, has been helping higher education institutions not only think about climate change and sustainability in regard to their own campuses, but also has been connecting and coordinating these individual campus efforts across its global network of 900 colleges and universities. Established in 2005, AASHE's goal is to, quote, inspire and catalyze higher education to lead the global sustainability transformation. It does this by offering professional learning, mentorship programs, conferences and events, other sustainability-related services to faculty, administrators, staff, and students who are trying to drive sustainability innovation on the campuses of AASHE member institutions. My guest today is AASHE's Director of Programs, Julian Dautremont, a longtime leader in the higher education sustainability community and one of AASHE's co-founders. In his work with AASHE, Julian has helped lead the creation of the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, STARS, something we discuss, as well as the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. Julian and I discussed the history of AASHE, some of the work the organization is helping facilitate among its global network of colleges, and how exactly higher education is doing in leading the global sustainability transformation. Besides his work with AASHE, Julian served for 2 years as the Chief Sustainability Officer of Alfred State College and spent another year as Senior Program Manager with Greener U. Julian has an MBA and an MS in Natural Resources and the Environment from the University of Michigan, and a BA in Environmental Studies from Lewis and Clark College. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Julian Dautremont. Julian Dautremont, welcome to climate.edu.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk a little bit about your role as the Director of Programs at AASHE, kind of what you're responsible for there. But you're also a co-founder of the organization, and so you have a long history with it. Can you tell us, for folks who may not have heard of AASHE before, what do you guys do? What is the mission of the organization, and what's the history of the organization? Because you're not a recent organization; you've been around for a while. So if you tell us a little bit about AASHE and what it does.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start with the acronym if folks aren't familiar. So AASHE, it's the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And as the name implies, we are an association of colleges and universities working towards sustainability. And our role, our functional role, is to help our members achieve their sustainability goals. Right? We help members learn from one another, basically.
So you're a membership organization.
Yes, we are a membership-based association. So institutions are members, not individuals. So like a whole college or university would become a member. And our mission is to inspire and catalyze higher education to lead the global sustainability transformation. And we achieve that by doing the kind of things you would expect an association to do to facilitate that learning across a membership. We do a big annual conference. We do webinars and workshops, courses. We have a large online repository with thousands of resources on all aspects of higher education sustainability. We have a mentorship program. We have a newsletter that highlights all the cool things that are going on in higher ed. We do publications. And then our flagship program is something called STARS, the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that later, but just
Certainly,
at a high level.
About that, yeah.
At a high level, it's a tool that campuses can use to measure and report on their sustainability performance. So anyway, that's the kind of the big picture of who we are. In terms of the history and how we got here.
Yeah, and just let me, this the reason for this podcast is a journey for me, right? In understanding, feeling a little forlorn about, what the sector where my career has been in higher ed, what I felt was, a lack of a response to climate change, as I've become more interested in it. And so as I was digging deeper into what was, what is happening, how are higher ed institutions responding, I came across these, several organizations, including AASHE, Second Nature is another one, really that are focused on, a more national, even international scale at kind of that institutional transformation, which for me was very encouraging. But it seems like those two organizations at least kind of came from the same idea. You want to talk a little bit about that in the history?
Yeah, well, so we were actually an early program of Second Nature. So Second Nature predates AASHE by about a decade or so. They were founded in the early 90s, and 10 years or so into their work, they started getting some grants to set up regional networks. That was a model they hit upon as something necessary to try to advance higher education sustainability. So they started a network in New Jersey that still exists. And we grew out of a network that Second Nature started in the Western United States and Canada. So we had our first meeting in 2002 at University of California, Santa Barbara, and they just pulled together a number of folks that Second Nature knew on the West Coast that were working on higher education sustainability, and formed this pretty loose network. But it held a few conferences and started to gain some kind of traction as an entity. And so by 2006, sort of became, we started doing services to try to attract members, because the grant that Second Nature had to support the founding of this network ran out, and so we needed some.
What was the grant?
It was from the Compton Foundation. I don't know how much it was for, to be totally honest. It wasn't really part of it. I just knew that's what got. We were called Education for Sustainability Western Network at the time, EFS West. That's what got it going. But we needed some more stable sort of income to keep a network going. If it was going to be anything more than like just a mailing list, right? If it was going to have staff and do things, it needed some kind of income stream. And so we settled upon membership as the strategy, and institutional membership in particular, as opposed to individual membership, largely just because the time it takes to recruit an institutional member is not dissimilar to the time it takes to recruit an individual member. And typically an institution will pay more. And it led to, or it felt appropriate given our focus on whole campus transformation, right? We weren't really interested in just working with one particular stakeholder group in higher ed. We wanted to transform the institution as a whole. So anyway, we went with institutional membership. And in order to justify that, started doing these different programs and services that would benefit members. And a lot of those made sense at a national scale. So by 2006, we decided to sort of become a national association, change our name, and as part of that, become sort of legally distinct from Second Nature, which at that time had sort of shifted its focus to just climate specifically as their main issue. And that's the pattern that exists today is AASHE is sort of the big tent sustainability and higher ed organization with climate as a key focus, but not the only focus, whereas Second Nature has really honed in on advancing climate leadership in higher education.
Do you continue to kind of work together and interact with Second Nature?
We meet pretty regularly. Like our executive director and the executive director of Second Nature have a standing like monthly meeting, try to coordinate our work, look for opportunities for synergies. We don't have any like direct collaborations right now, but we partnered on a webinar last year with the Department of Energy to help folks figure out how to take advantage of the different federal support for sustainability. So there's some of that happening, and we collaborate. So they work their greenhouse gas reporting. So they collect greenhouse gas data for members of or signatories of the Second Nature climate leadership commitments. And we've tried to align the data that we collect in our reporting program, in this case STARS, with the format that they are using as well. And even created some ways to make it easy to sort of port back and forth. It's not a direct like click a button kind of thing, but we've tried to simplify that process for institutions that are doing both. So there is some of that kind of coordination and alignment happening. And like I said, we're always looking for opportunities. But yeah, that's what we have right now.
Thank you for making the distinction with Second Nature really being a climate change focus organization and AASHE's role in really kind of focus on sustainability. What does that mean to AASHE? And give us some examples of some of the work that maybe the member colleges do, or some of the things that how do they take advantage of the network and the kind of focus on sustainability?
Yeah. So one of the beautiful things about sustainability, but also one of the challenges is that it is an expansive concept. And it can mean a lot of different things. And as a result, our membership is doing a pretty wide range of different things. So on one hand, there's a whole piece that's focused on curriculum and infusing sustainability across the curriculum, ensuring that graduates have foundational knowledge of sustainability and are equipped with the skills to help solve sustainability challenges. So that's one whole area of work. There's folks working on the research side. Higher Ed has an enormous contribution to make in terms of the research that it's doing. For example, discovering new sustainable technologies and piloting them, all that kind of thing is another area of work. Then there's the physical operations of the campus, which is what a good chunk of our members are focused on. And in that dimension, they're looking at how do we reduce the campus's greenhouse gas emissions? How do we reduce the waste output from the campus? How do we reduce our water use? How do we transition to renewable energy? How do we manage our campus grounds more sustainably? How do we rewild our campus? How to manage our buildings more sustainably? So there's a whole realm of campus operations. And then the last kind of, well, maybe two more buckets. There's engagement. So how do we engage our campus and our external community in conversations around sustainability? So more sort of informal education. It's not the formal curriculum, but there's lots of co-curricular programs and community partnerships and that type of work that can relate to sustainability and that our members are doing. And for us, a key part of sustainability, we don't think of sustainability as just sort of another word for environmentalism. We do really try to take seriously the social dimensions of sustainability. So,
what do you mean by that?
So it can mean a lot of different things, but I'll talk about it in the context of STARS because it's the most concrete.
Okay.
Where we do have indicators for whole number of things related to social sustainability. So we look at employee compensation. Are employees being paid a living wage?
Okay.
We look at affordability issues. So can people afford to go to this institution, or is it priced so that it's only the most wealthy that can take advantage of it?
Got it.
what support is there for students from marginalized groups, and how well are they integrated into the fabric of the institution? How welcoming is the campus climate? So there's a variety of things around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll look at some governance issues. So who's included in the governance bodies? Do students have a voice in institutional governance? Do faculty and staff have a voice in institutional governance? We'll look at some socially responsible investment type questions. So that's at a big level. What I mean is sort of
right.
caring for people. It'd be like the most summary type thing you could give it, in addition to the planet.
Got it. Okay. So I do want to talk about, as we mentioned, we do want to talk about stars, and we'll get to that in a moment. But how have you, as a, with your history with the organization, how has it, has the mission evolved with the growing awareness of and alarmed by, kind of climate change and the increasing number of weather events and disasters and increased temperature of the planet that we've seen? Have you, seen a uptick in interest? Have your colleges, college members, been talking to you about kind of an increased focus on sustainability around the kind of urgent climate issues that we're hearing about? What is that? Has there been an arc to that over the years of the organization?
Somewhat, but maybe less than we might hope. I mean, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So partly the institutions that are engaged with AASHE, many of them are not new to climate, right? So
right.
With Second Nature, we started the American College and University President's Climate Commitment in 2006 is when we kicked that off, right? And we were able to recruit 700 or some campuses in the first couple of years to make a commitment to carbon neutrality. Many of those 700 campuses are still the bulk of our membership and Second Nature's as well. So we're working with institutions that have some history here, and they're not new to the climate emergency. Now, things may have, it's become, more obvious and more dire in a way, but it's not like what we're seeing is a surprise. It's what folks were predicting at that stage. So, in that sense, the main thing that we see that's happening among our membership is just a greater sophistication. And many of them are making, not necessarily at the speed that we would like and the extent that we'd like, but are making real progress in decarbonizing their campuses. There've been, things that we couldn't have even imagined, back when we started it, but major investments in renewable energy, and trying to shift their consumption away from fossil fuel derived electricity to renewable electricity, which is really pretty significant. We're also seeing interest in sort of campus electrification, and then trying to shift the heating load to renewable as well. Heating has always been a little bit more challenging because it's typically combustion based. Right. But we are seeing a real growth and interest in geothermal type strategies,
right?
And then also heat pumps, air source heat pumps as well, maybe water source on an occasion, but other kinds of electricity-based heating systems as a way to get off fossil fuels. So there has been a sort of growth and sophistication of the strategies and the investment that our members are making to address climate change. And in parallel with that, the thing that has maybe changed is the greater attention to climate resilience, because we are now seeing some of the consequences more clearly, or more directly, I should say, that campuses have to be really thinking a little bit more about, if you're in Miami, for example, you got to be thinking about sea level rise,
right,
as a real concern. And other places are thinking about flooding. Other places are thinking about forest fires and the increase in wildfires that we've been seeing. Have to be worried about droughts in some cases and water supply. So some of the sustainability challenges that we anticipate are going to be intensifying over the next, well, who knows how long, but going to be intensifying over quite a significant period. Campuses need to be planning for that. And we're seeing some more focus in those areas.
Sticking on the topic of campus resilience and the physical plant of the campus, are there any member colleges in your network that stand out as doing kind of innovative, interesting thing, or maybe are fairly advanced in their planning? I know you got to roll with it. You can't be stationary. But any of your members stand out that you want to tell us about?
Not really in this particular.
Okay.
Not because there's not interesting things happening. I'm just. I think the conversations there, it's difficult, and I don't have a campus and I'm like, yeah, they've really have figured this out. I think it's much more in the we are trying to figure it out rather than like, oh yeah, we've got this, solved, because it's a long-term challenge and it requires in many cases significant allocation of resources with it unclear.
I guess like, I'm one of the things that I think one of the challenges of this, of the many challenges, and the thing that's interesting for me is it really demands of, I think, most higher ed institutions a kind of larger partnership with, they are located in regions, in states or countries. They're located in cities. They are located in places where it can't just be the university or college, solving a problem for their campus, but really kind of is integrated with the wider area where the college is located. And I think for some institutions that could be a big challenge, or at least a different way of doing things, right, or than they're used to. And so I know that there are really interesting partnerships and things going on, but I didn't know if I know Dickinson College, I believe, is a member, and they often come up as a real, doing some interesting work and a real focus on this issue. But I don't know if anything stands out with interesting approaches colleges are taking to do this, and maybe not start solving it, but in engaging in ways that may be a little unique.
I think you're right that in the context of sort of how higher ed operates, resilience conversations do pose some unique challenges and do require much greater interaction and relationship with the surrounding community. Because it's very difficult to be sort of an island of resilience if the surrounding community is not like solve the problem. You can't really solve most of these issues at a campus level.
Right.
A campus that comes to mind, even though I don't know a tremendous amount about the details, but our conference was in Boston this year, and Northeastern University is in Boston, and they have been developing their climate action plan with a real focus on community engagement and trying to understand how the campus can assist the community at large in addressing or how to resolve these different unnatural challenges and disasters. So heat waves, what's the role of the campus in a heat wave? And can it provide cooling stations or places for people to go to escape the heat wave? So that's, I think, a really interesting conversation that is definitely not a traditional role for higher ed. I mean, higher ed's always have some connection with its community, but a much closer collaboration than perhaps has typically been the case.
Yeah, I think typically community colleges are a little better at that, as their name implies. They're in communities and
yeah, for sure.
With their workforce focus often, makes that a little bit more necessary. But even on that level, I think that the kinds of ways that a college in let's say a metropolitan area or city government or whatever, would need to work together, I think is a different kind of animal.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned that AASHE does that I certainly want to talk about is the idea of curriculum, and you have as part of your membership, or part of the things that the work that AASHE does, are called Centers for Sustainability Across the Curriculum. You want to tell us a little bit of what that is and what that work entails?
Sure. So maybe to start sort of big picture, why we think curriculum is so important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the basic idea is that the education is the primary thing that higher ed does, right? Its core mission is to educate students.
Agreed.
And when you think about how higher education can be useful in overcoming and addressing sustainability challenges, I think people often tend to think about, they got to reduce their own impact. So all the operational stuff that I mentioned earlier, and that is important. But when you look at it in the sort of bigger scale of things, higher education's physical impact, or let's say its carbon footprint, is a small percentage of the total national or global, carbon footprint. But higher education's educational footprint is enormous. Basically, all the decision makers who in society are politicians, are business leaders, are cultural and spiritual leaders, they're all going through higher education almost. And there's only, in the US at least, about 4,000 institutions of higher education. That's a lot, but it's a much smaller kind of, it's a manageable number of entities that one can imagine if they all shifted to models of sustainability and were integrating sustainability into the curriculum, like you could fairly quickly transform how the whole society is thinking about sustainability. And so for me, that's one of the real potential contributions of higher education is in that curriculum side, is in ensuring that its graduates have the knowledge and skills to solve sustainability challenges.
So what does that look like? Is it you say, here's the curriculum? and
no, that doesn't work.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't tell people what to teach at all. The model, and this is a good segue to talking about the centers, but the model that we have been promoting for many years, and it's based on something that was pioneered at Northern Arizona University in the Ponderosa Project, and then further developed at Emory University, and where they call it the Piedmont Project. But it's this model of infusing sustainability across the curriculum that brings together faculty from a range of disciplines, and it gives them some prompts. It gives them some education around sustainability, but it mostly is about creating the space for them to think through in a supportive way how sustainability might fit into their discipline and the courses that they teach. So nobody's being told you have to teach this or this is the way to teach it. It's giving them space and a community of supportive people in which to think about that. And it's been enormously successful at a range of campuses after, the two that I mentioned, Northern Arizona and Emory. Mm-hmm. We've been doing workshops with the leaders of those two programs for 2 decades now almost, and training other faculty in that model. And then they go back to their campuses and start similar programs. And like I said, they've been quite effective. Dickinson, you mentioned earlier, they actually are an institution that has one of these programs and have been quite successful. They've trained a huge percentage of their faculty has gone through one of these trainings. And typically they include some kind of stipend for the participants, but you only get the stipend after you have turned in and shown, yes, I've revised my syllabi or I've created a new course on this topic. So there is an incentive to do so, but you're not required to, and it's totally possible to attend and decide that's not really for me and just go on to something else. So they're really careful to avoid any kind of infringement upon academic freedom is
Yeah.
not going to work, right? That is going to run into all kinds of resistance and just not be effective. So it is much more about leading folks through a supportive process where they are excited about it, because faculty want their courses to be relevant to current challenges. They want to address contemporary issues. So it once you give them that space and a little bit of some prompts and some support, you'll find they can be very creative in thinking about new and different ways to do it. And then you just get this sort of blossoming of different approaches rather than kind of a monoculture of this is the module that everybody must use. So anyway, so that model has been growing and spreading to a range of different campuses. And so where the centers come in is we realized this model was great, but not every school had the resources or support to create their own version of the Ponderosa and Piedmont project.
Right.
And or at least we weren't expanding the number of schools that had these programs quickly enough to get the level of change that we want. So we thought, what if we worked with institutions that have now been doing this for a number of years and had some success on their own campus, and could they open up their workshops to faculty from other institutions so that we can start to begin to expand the number of faculty that we're reaching. And so we put out a call to see, like, if you've been doing training on your campus for a while and are interested in working with us to open up, let us know. And we started with about a dozen centers. We're now up to 17, I think. And so they're scattered across most of the U.S. We've got a couple in Canada and even one in Hong Kong. But their only requirement to be a center is to offer at least one workshop over each year that is open to faculty from other institutions. And we help them promote it so they get the word out, at least to our network. Obviously, we hope they will promote it to their own networks as well. And the exact focus of the workshop is really up to them. And we've had quite a bit of diversity here. We had one workshop that was really on using the campus as a living lab. We've had others on indigenous environmental knowledge. So they can be quite focused on different aspects of sustainability. They're not all like, this is sustainability 101. They're because we have a range of centers with different areas of expertise and interests. It enables us to offer a wide range of training to meet different needs. There have been some on climate education specifically, environmental justice. So it's been really interesting to see how the centers take up the challenge and create programming that they think is going to be relevant to faculty from other institutions.
Okay, so and so the curricula, as it were, is really set by the I guess hosting institutions. Or is it coordinated in some way, or is this a kind of organic?
It's pretty organic. We do meet with the centers like as a group a couple times a year, just to like check in. How are things going? What are you planning for the next year? So there's some very light coordination in that sense. That if the two are planning to do something kind of similar, maybe they collaborate, or maybe they at least try to schedule them so that they're not overlapping. We've had a bit of challenge over the years in that many campuses, for reasons that are probably pretty obvious, like to do their workshops around the same time of year, which is often near the end of a semester. So January is a time when campuses sometimes do this because it's
right. The academic calendar.
Exactly. It kind of drives the scheduling a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're having a time when like May and June there was a whole clump of workshops to the degree where it's possible they were competing with one another a little bit. Because although we had originally conceptualized these workshops as mostly attracting a local audience. So the original idea was, let's have one in every state, and that would be the center that trains people within that state. It hasn't really worked that way. We'll have some that are kind of they're a national workshop and they'll draw people from all over the place. While others might be more regional in scope. So it's been sort of variable in that sense as well. So anyway, we did have a glut in May and June that's been resolved a little bit, but it's still, tend to be quite a few at that time of year, just because it's a convenient time for faculty to go to a training like this.
So a member institution could, as part of this, send someone to be trained by AASHE and come back and do more of an institutional trainings for their faculty over a longer term. Or, if the resources aren't there for that college, they can send a handful of faculty or trainers, I guess, the people who are going to be trained to these. They go to, for example, Dickinson College on campus. Are they held online or both?
Both, actually. Most are in person, but especially during the pandemic, folks shifted online. But even before the pandemic, we had a few centers that offered their training online. So again, there's like a real diversity in the ways in which campuses or centers are approaching their kind of obligation to do an annual workshop. And we encourage that. We're not trying to sort of mandate any particular way.
Right. Is there a network, I suppose, that has emerged around this amongst the faculty that are, longtime trainers or participants? Do you know if there's a ongoing? Seems like a good opportunity, at least for kind of ongoing relationships to knowledge exchange. And is that part of this at all?
Yes, although we haven't been as effective at facilitating. Like that was part of the vision, that we imagined that by bringing these different centers together, they would be sharing their knowledge and experience with one another and helping sort of grow the field. Yeah. And it happens a little bit, but when we get together as a group, where, like I said, there's 17 or so centers. Not all of them will show up, but there's still 14, 15 people on a call typically. And so they're all sharing a little bit, but it's not about what they're up to, but there hasn't been that much of the kind of gelling of let's do something as a group. Although some of them, we've had a few centers get together to do a workshop, like at our conference or other conferences. So there is some collaboration happening. Yeah. And we do have a listserv for the centers that enables them to communicate with one another. We also have an online community for not just for the centers, but for any of the faculty that are doing this kind of sustainability across the curriculum work. So there is some dialogue happening there and some collaboration. There is a group that's been working on trying to figure out how to make sustainability competencies and identify relevant sustainability competencies for different disciplines. Oh, yeah. So there are some interesting things coming out of it. But that's like a little small subgroup. So different projects kind of emerge out of it. But the community itself of the larger community is not super active right now. I don't think it's quite big enough to get that critical mass. But we are continuing to grow it every year by doing more training. So, that's our hope, that there can be some of that shared learning, and so that the innovations that are successful are spread across the network faster.
You mentioned these kind of standards, which made me think and want to confirm this is not just for biology and more STEM faculty. I am assuming that if I'm a poetry faculty member or in kind of this other kind of disciplines outside of STEM that you might not immediately think of around sustainability, is that part of this as well?
Yeah, they're intended to be very interdisciplinary. So art history folks have come to these workshops. It is not intended. So I should clarify the centers. Some of them do very specific workshops that are maybe somewhat more discipline centric, but not necessarily. They choose what they're going to do. Our the core model, the Piedmont Ponderosa project model, is based on bringing faculty from any discipline on a campus together to think about what sustainability means for them and their discipline and how they might do it in their own course.
Right.
So it really is intended to be open to anybody and is enhanced by the participation of folks from a wide range of disciplines rather than just one or one segment of campus.
So these centers and these trainings around sustainability in the curriculum is one area of focus for AASHE. You also have a mentorship program, and we had just mentioned this idea of community of practice, but what does the mentorship program look like? How would a college participate or facilitate that?
Basically, every summer we put out a call for mentors and mentees, and also peer collaborators is a third category we have for people who don't want the implied hierarchy between a mentor and a mentee, but want to collaborate with somebody.
Right.
So we put out an open call. Anybody from member organization can apply and say they want to be one or more of those categories. And then we do our best to match people based on interest and what they're working on and what they express they are looking for. And we'll often do a lot of kind of outside recruitment once we see the pool, because every year we've done this, and it's now, I think we're in our 5th year or something like that. Mm-hmm. We have more prospective mentees than we do mentors.
Oh, okay.
And so it's usually we then try to find if there's a mentee that we couldn't match, we didn't have enough people for them, or they had a more specific need. We try to find, is there somebody in our community that we know of that would be a good match for what they're looking for? And so I'll do a lot of direct recruitment. So every year we end up matching somewhere around 80 to 100 pairs. So meaning 160 to 200 people. Mm-hmm. And there's always some that we can't match because they have very narrow interests. Or
yeah, can you give us an example of what someone might, potential mentee might,
sure. So they might say,
looking for.
We're embarking on a redo of our climate action plan, or developing climate action plan for our first time. I'm really looking to meet with somebody who's gone through this process before and could walk me through the pitfalls or help me with stakeholder engagement or whatever their particular concern is in relation to the climate action plan. We have people do it for STARS too. I'm doing my first STARS report this year. I'd love to talk to somebody more experienced. A lot of folks are just looking like they're early in their career and would like to talk to a more senior sustainability leader to help them think through how to grow in their career and get to be a sustainability director at some point. Could be working on a waste reduction project and want somebody with that expertise.
So it really does run the gamut of, a faculty member looking for some particular, peer partnership to sustainability kind of professionals, more administrative, campus plant kind of things. That could be anybody at that institution could fill out this application and looking for support, or vice versa.
Correct. Yeah. We even have students who apply, and they're sometimes a little bit harder to match. And same thing, faculty too can be a little bit harder because they might have like a specific research interest where it's like, I'm interested in sustainability in healthcare, and I'm looking to find somebody who wants to like work with me on that. If we don't get anybody who is looking for that match, I might try to find somebody, but that's like a little bit harder sometimes. I think we had somebody who was really interested in sustainability in dental schools this year.
Okay.
And I found some other people who were doing sustainability in dentistry education, but they weren't part of our network. So when I reached out, they did respond. They're like, they passed on the opportunity, I guess. So I think we weren't able to make a match in that situation. But like I said, we always try to meet people where they're at and find something that fits their needs.
Right.
And we have a pretty good track record. Not all the matches work, obviously, and some people apply and then decide it's not for them. But I think as a program, it works pretty well. And we've had some like lifelong, or what we assume will be lifelong connections come out of it, like really strong relationships where people continue to meet.
What are the formal bounds around this? Is it Maybe
It's
I'm
just a
sorry if you
1 year
said
program.
1 year. Okay.
Yeah, so we match you in September typically, and then you've got the full academic year. And by June, we're sort of wrapping up and beginning to start to recruit next year's
Got it.
cohort. But there's one group, they apply every year, or one team, or dyad, I guess, two people. They apply every year and they ask to be matched with each other again. So that, like, I don't really know. They don't need us to like formalize it, but for some reason that's important to them. So they apply every year and like, I'd like to be matched with so and so. Okay, we're happy to do it.
So do you get anything? I mean, get in quotes, right? So it's just a matching service, and then you leave it to the mentee and mentor to kind of connect via.
It's pretty open-ended. We do have, there's like a little handbook with some guidance on like how to get the most out of the relationship. We send a few prompts over the course of the year, sort of encouraging them. I mean, we encourage them to meet at least once a month, by phone at least, if not in person, because they're often geographically disparate. And we'll ask them to set some goals for the years that they can report to us. So there's a little bit of structure, but the success of it really does depend upon the mentee and mentor actually taking the time to connect with one another and decide what they want to do and then doing it.
Yeah, right.
We can only do so much to kind of hold their hands. So it's, the matching is the bulk of the thing that we provide, and then it is mostly up to them within the context of what we provide.
Got it. Well, we did say earlier that we wanted to talk about what we've referred to as STARS, which is the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, which is another project, I guess, of AASHE. You want to talk a little bit about what STARS is? What is it? How did it emerge? How it's being used?
Yeah, so big picture, it's a tool that campuses use to measure and report on their sustainability performance. They they collect a ton of data entered into this online reporting form that we have. It's scored according to a pretty detailed methodology. And then based on that score, they get a rating. So you can be, for example, a STARS Silver or STARS Gold, STARS Platinum institution. And it's a pretty comprehensive assessment system. I mentioned earlier that we really try to take the social dimensions of sustainability seriously within STARS as well as our other programs. It gets all the campus operation stuff. It's got curriculum. It's got research, the engagement stuff I mentioned earlier, the governance, planning, social equity. All of that is in here. And anyway, once you you submit all this data to us, we review it, you get your rating, then all that data lives on our website. So anybody can go and look at an institution's STARS report, see how they scored, see where they did well, maybe where they didn't. But it's also a fabulous way to learn about who's doing what, right? Which is kind of, again, is our core function, is to help our community learn from one another. And so STARS is a key way that we do that, because, like I said, you can go and look and see who did well and how they did that well, and what they're doing. You can find a list of everybody who scored, well in this credit, that kind of thing.
And how long is this program, the STARS program?
Yeah, we started working on it in 2006, was the first, we kind of announced at the very first AASHE conference in concept. And then it took us about 3 years of developing some drafts and then pilot testing it before we had something that we felt like was good enough to make sort of an official release. And so in 2009 is when STARS actually came out and you could start to submit data. And so, yeah, it's going on 15 years now. And it's evolved quite a bit over time. We do update it on a semi-regular basis. We try not to change it too quickly, because our community, on the one hand, they want us to fix things and change things and make it better. But there's also you get kind of locked into like, oh, this is the data that AASHE wants. And when we change it, it can make some other challenges. So we try to balance that, desire for change and growth with the desire for some consistency. So it doesn't change super quickly, but we started with version 1.0, and then we did 1.1, 1.2. in 2016, I think we released version 2, and then 2.1, 2.2 is the current version, and we're about to release version 3.0 later this year. So it's gone through two major revisions basically, and some smaller ones as well.
What are can you characterize some of the updates for version 3? How
Sure. So a lot of it is sort of smaller tweaks to the credits that make them a little bit just easier or provide more comparable data. But kind of the big picture things that I think folks will notice. So one of those is that we've really tried to streamline stars. One of the biggest barriers to adoption is that it's a pretty big involved process to do stars. And so we knew that was something we wanted to focus on, and we did end up cutting a lot of data fields. Most of them were optional, so it's not like it's hugely saving, but I think in total the number of data fields has been cut by around 40% from version 2.2. So that's pretty significant, and it should make stars quite a bit more approachable, and just spend a little bit less time on just trying to gather all the data, right? But we haven't cut the scope at all. In fact, the scope has increased a little bit, the topical scope, and we've strengthened a couple areas. So one area that we really focused on this time around was the social equity section. Historically, that part of stars has been fairly qualitative, didn't have a lot of quantitative metrics, and we felt that wasn't doing the best job of distinguishing between real leaders in that area and folks who are have some room for improvement. And so shifting to more quantitative metrics, I think, is going to give us a little bit more insight into what's going on and just make that section of stars more robust. So that's
what kind of metrics have you added to that for the quantitative metrics?
Yeah, good question. So let me just, so I don't give some specific examples. So we have some credits on gender parity that we didn't used to have. We're looking more at the racial and ethnic diversity of the campus population. So before we asked qualitatively about what kind of support programs exist, now we're actually trying to get the percentage data, right? So what percentage of your student body is marginalized racial, ethnic, or indigenous groups? And how does that compare to the body the state or region that you serve? We're asking about student success rates too. So how does the completion rate for low-income students differ than the student body as a whole, or for students from marginalized groups? So that's some of the more quantitative metrics that we're looking at. We also try to get affordability in more of a quantitative way. So we're asking now about the number of paid work hours per year required to meet the average net price for low-income students, which is a fairly common way that we've seen of assessing affordability. But again, we didn't have that. It was more qualitative in previous versions of stars.
That's interesting. That's a interesting, fairly global perspective around sustainability. You're really getting at this kind of fundamental institutional metrics, which I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah, we're trying to. And we're also, you maybe think of with the word global, trying to be more globally applicable with this round of stars. So
yeah, and I should say, I don't know if we made this clear earlier. You are a global organization. You mentioned a college in Hong Kong, but you do have institutions outside the U.S.
Correct. Yeah. So most of our staff live in the U.S. and most of our members are in the U.S. And quite a few in Canada. So U.S. and Canada is our kind of core countries, but we do have members from around the world, and then certainly in any of our programs, participants from all over the place. And stars in particular, we've made an effort to recruit participants from other parts of the world, because we think it has potential to serve as a global standard in a way that would be helpful.
I think when I first heard about stars and kind of cursorily read about it, I thought, oh, this is a kind of a LEEDs certification. But I'm not saying that's correct necessarily, but how do institutions, when an institution says, we think we want to do this, we want to enter into the STARS process and start this reporting and see where we can get, what's the rationale? Is it mostly internal? Like, here's a way to help us achieve our sustainability goals? Is it external, where you use your STARS, rating to promote the institution? Is it both? Is there a way to characterize kind of the main reason that an institution may want to undergo what we said is a pretty comprehensive process?
Yeah, it is a little bit of both. And it varies by institution, but some institutions, it is much more focused on the internal, right? Mm-hmm. They're looking for a way to assess their own progress, maybe communicate that to their stakeholders at the campus. Maybe they put it in their own strategic plan that we have a goal to achieve a certain rating by a certain date. That's something we're seeing a little bit of. Maybe they just want to be able to benchmark and make the case to the institutional leadership that we need to invest more in this area because we're falling behind our peers, and they're not even going to promote the rating.
Right.
So that can happen. But I think the external is important for most folks as well. They like that validation, that because STARS provides an overall score and a rating. It does provide a way to sort of simply communicate sustainability performance to external audiences, that they can look at a sustainability report with a bunch of data, but it doesn't really tell you much about how is this institution performing relative to other institutions. Mm-hmm. STARS does that in a way that is fairly well supported, because you can go and see the data and see why an institution scored better than another, and we have all that data publicly, and we do make a real effort to check some of the data, and credits are well defined. So it's pretty rigorous, and that enables it to be meaningful for making external comparisons. So yeah, institutions can be pretty proud of their ratings. We've seen Thompson Rivers University in Canada. They were, I think, the first STARS Platinum institution in Canada.
That's the highest rating.
Yeah, STARS Platinum is the highest rating, exactly. And there's only there's less than 20 of them. I don't remember exactly how many there are at the moment, but there's not a ton. It is pretty hard to get STARS Platinum. But they bought themselves a STARS Platinum plaque and put it like a pretty big plaque, and it's on the outside of their sustainability office. Okay. We've seen other institutions. I think University of New Hampshire is another STARS Platinum institution. They had the little banners hanging off of light posts around campus to celebrate their STARS Platinum rating. So I think that the branding part of it is really important for many folks. And the other thing I should mention is that STARS also feeds into the Princeton Review green rankings. Oh, so okay. Princeton Review is a test prep, but also college sort of information service, and they do a whole variety of rankings, including a sustainability ranking, or they call it the green ranking, and they use STARS data for that.
Oh, interesting.
And so when you participate in STARS, you can opt in to have us share the data you've provided to us to Princeton Review. And then Princeton Review, they run it through their own scoring methodology, and they only look at a subset of what the things that we're looking at, but they come up with their own score and then publish every year their own green ratings.
Has the participation in STARS, is it growing? Is there increased interest? Has it remained steady? And how long do you if you get a platinum or a gold rating, how long does that do you get to keep that before having to report again? Is it a yearly process?
The ratings are good for 3 years.
3 years,
or up to 3 years. You can resubmit as often as once a year, and there's a good number of institutions that just have made it an annual process, because it in a way makes it more manageable. But you keep your rating for 3 years if you don't resubmit. In terms of how it's changed over time, we have had pretty steady growth, but has more plateaued recently. We haven't been seeing a ton of growth
Mm-hmm.
in recent years, and that's the same with AASHE's membership generally. So it's an area that we're part of that streamlining I mentioned earlier that's embedded in 3.0 is an attempt to help to boost those numbers by making it more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem that we have is that we have most campuses that have a paid sustainability staff person and are plausibly interested in this are doing it already. So it's how do we make this accessible for institutions that maybe don't have a sustainability staff person
Right. Yeah.
to do the work. So if it's just a sustainability committee made up of volunteers, or there's an interested faculty member, can we make this something that a class could feasibly do over
Oh,
a
yeah.
semester or even a couple semesters maybe? And that I don't know that we're quite there yet, but it's getting closer to that. And we're also looking at, can we produce some resources to help faculty if they wanted to do that? And we've started doing something too. We do a STAR the last couple of years. We've done a STARS support cohort for folks that are doing STARS for the first time and want sort of somebody to hold their hand through the process. So they have monthly meetings with an AASHE staff person, the access to a private group and in our online community where they can connect with the other participants. And we try to lead them through the steps and try to help them understand where they should focus their efforts initially and get them to finish their submission by the end of the year. And that's been, I think, successful at helping some of those institutions that want to do it, but were maybe a little bit intimidated, because
Mm-hmm.
it is, especially if you're somebody taking this on as like an additional project and it's not part of your job, like it might be for a sustainability staff person. The technical manual is over 300 pages, right? So you open that thing
Wow.
up and you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what? Like, I can't feasibly do this. And I think it looks more intimidating than it is, but it is a big task. And you
Yeah.
do have to engage with a whole range of stakeholders on your campus and collect a lot of data and then put it into our system. So, um, yeah, we're always looking at how we can make it so that institutions don't need to have a paid sustainability staff person to do it, but without losing the rigor that makes it
Yeah.
meaningful as well. And
That's a
that's a
challenge.
real tough balance. So we'll see how this next version goes, and if we see a little bit more uptake from institutions in that situation.
Okay, so, I want to wrap up our conversation today, which has been really great. I've really learned a lot, and it's great to hear about how much AASHE is doing to support their members and with this focus on sustainability. But I do want to step back a bit. Again, if you could call higher ed a sector, which maybe that isn't something you could really kind of do. It doesn't really, higher ed often doesn't work in any kind of connected way. But
Sure.
thinking of higher ed, in the United States, or you can think about it globally, and with your long history of working at AASHE, how do you think higher ed is responding to this climate emergency, and what do you think needs to happen? Something that maybe AASHE can facilitate, or other things. What are some ways that you see are a direction that an administrator, a president of a college listening, might need to hear to really address the crisis that we're in?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, like big picture, how is higher ed responding? I'd say insufficiently,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't think as a sector that we are doing enough to address the climate crisis, like at all. And there's
Okay.
AASHE's membership is uh, not even a quarter of higher ed institutions in the United States.
What is your membership? I didn't ask. What's the number?
Um, somewhere around 800
800. Okay.
institutions. And again, probably 100 or so of those in other parts of the world, at least.
Mm-hmm.
We're even, within AASHE, we're only reaching less than a quarter of higher ed institutions in this country, let alone the rest of the world. And I don't think it's entirely true that three quarters that we're not reaching is doing nothing.
Sure.
But I don't think they're doing a lot. And so that does, to me, speak to a real failure of leadership within our sector. And what I'd like to see happen is for climate to have the same level of executive attention and mobilization that, maybe not the same, but something comparable to COVID, right? Every institution had to take COVID seriously immediately. Many of them shut down for weeks, months, whole semesters, and totally shifted what they're doing. They made major changes with remarkable speed, which indicates that change is possible in certain circumstances, at least. And what would it look like to take the climate emergency with that degree of seriousness? And I don't think it has to mean shutting down immediately or anything. I think there are very real things campuses can do that are less disruptive than the COVID response. But they need to make those investments. They need to start thinking about how they shift to renewable energy, and not just like a few solar panels on a building, but shifting the entire campus's energy demand to renewable sources. How do they do that? It can be a long-term challenge, especially if you've invested in a new heating plant that's fossil fuel based, but there's still your electric. Like, there's major things campuses can do that are difficult, but certainly not undoable for many institutions. And
what about at the curriculum level, which is another shift? Are you more hopeful about that? Do you see more progress with that, or is it similar?
Maybe less progress, honestly. Okay. So campus operations, there's been a lot of stuff happening. On the curriculum side, there is a lot of stuff happening, and I really don't want to minimize that, because it.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear about that. Yeah, we're talking about a broad sector, and some generalizations here, but
exactly right. I want to celebrate all the amazing things that are happening, while acknowledging that it's probably not enough, or at least it's not matching what I think higher education's potential contributions are. So on the curricular side, I think there's two kind of major areas of development that we encourage. So the one is the sustainability across the curriculum, trying to figure out how to get sustainability across the disciplines and in ways that are discipline specific. And I don't think it has to be like everybody gets the same Sustainability 101 course, but if you're in the engineering program, how do you think about how sustainability relates to engineers?
Sure, right.
It's going to be a pretty significant part of their career in all likelihood. So and they have a real opportunity to impact negatively or positively the problem. How do we sort of push towards positive impacts?
Yeah.
So and you can do that through programs like we encourage with Piedmont and Ponderosa, the other kinds of course incentives. There's a whole variety of options there. Different cluster hires around sustainability, I think, are interesting. But there is some movement in creating requirements that all students do some kind of sustainability or climate course. University of California, San Diego just adopted a requirement that all their students have to take a course around climate. Not all the same course necessarily, but there's a range of courses that can count, just like other gen ed requirements.
Like gen ed requirement, yep.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really interesting as an approach to try to ensure that all students have at least some foundational understanding of sustainability and their role in it. So anyway, that's one, is the foundational knowledge for everybody, ideally with a discipline lens, so they really understand how it relates to their discipline and doesn't feel like something they're just forced to go through and doesn't really relate to them. But then I think you also need, for students that are going to make solving sustainability challenges their career, academic programs in sustainability. And there are a number of those that have been created now, but it's still not a super common major. or minor even. And so creating those kind of programs that allow students to specialize a little bit in sustainability, I think, is another track that we see campuses doing and that we encourage. And particularly, I think it's exciting when it's something that can easily be integrated into a second major. So, or if it is like concentration within an existing major. Right. So like let's say if you're doing business, there's a sustainable business concentration within that, so that it's, a real option, and hopefully everybody in the business school gets some sustainability exposure, but there are folks that can go deeper. So that's the other main path that we're encouraging on curriculum: new academic programs, certificates, minors, majors, etc.
Well, Julian Dautremont, I want to thank you for your time today. It was a great conversation. Really enjoyed it, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, happy to do it. Really enjoyed the conversation, and appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what AASHE's up to.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Climate.edu is written by me, Richard Sebastian. The theme music is by Serge Quadrado. You'll find a link to Serge's free music archive page in the show notes, where you can also find a guest bio, transcripts, and additional links and resources. You can also go to the show website at climate.edu.com. Yes, that's right. The word climate, DOTEDU.com, where you'll find other episodes of climate.edu, get news and updates related to climate change in higher ed, or to get in touch with me. If you like this episode, make my day by subscribing. Thanks for listening. See you next time.